What's cracking, all you beautiful creatures? I'm Carl Hassan.
And I'm Max Cal.
And I've got great news.
Oh, were you able to renegotiate with our credit card company so we don't have to pay so much for our monthly bills?
Oh, way better than that. I signed us up for the martial arts tournament at Japan.
What?
Yeah, there's a cash prize, and with us both competing, that doubles our chances of winning.
No, we're not even martial artists, Carl. And doubling zero still gives us zero chances of winning.
Oh, Max, I think we've watched enough martial arts films and pro wrestling to know how to fight. Check this out.
This has nothing to do with martial arts.
Max, if breaking inanimate objects isn't a good indicator of how good of a fighter you are, I don't know what is.
But isn't this dangerous?
Yeah, maybe you're right. Senor X. The fire will weaken the wood, allowing my martial arts spirit to pass right through. Budokan, the Martial Spirit, is a fighting game released on various platforms between 1989 and 1991. It was the fourth game designed by Michael Kosaka. The game was developed and produced by Electronic Arts.
Electronic Arts, or EA, is currently the third largest video game company in the world. They're perhaps best known for their sports titles, regarding the NFL license, and being the first company to win Worst Company in America twice in a row by consumerist polls. Interestingly, even though EA published over 40 games by the end of 1989, Budokan was only the third game they developed eternally. The game gets its name from Japan's famous arena, the Nippon Budokan, which was originally built for judo competitions during the 1964 Olympics. It has since become a popular venue for music artists and professional wrestling.
Budokan was directed by industry veteran Michael Kosaka, whose previous EA game Skate or Die was very successful. Michael got his start in the industry in 1984, providing graphics for the Atari 2600 port of Crystal Castles. He was an obvious choice to design Budokan, as he was also a serious karate and aikido student.
In many ways, Budokan is the game I always wanted to do, and always dreaded doing. I've always wanted to do a realistic simulation of martial arts training, but I knew that the technological restrictions of a computer format would be a great handicap. There's only so much data space available, limited screen area, a joystick keyboard interface, etc. The obstacles always seem insurmountable to achieve a truly satisfying computer game experience. So when it came to design Budokan, it was either put up or shut up.
Since Budokan was eventually released, we can only assume Mr. Kosaka never shut up. Lead programming duties fell upon Ray E. Toby. Ray was still in high school when he was contracted by EA due to a chance meeting with the co-creator of the Apple I computer, Steve Wozniak. Steve was impressed with a flight simulator Ray was working on at the time called Alpha Strike. EA quickly contracted Ray to develop a similar title called Skyfox, which EA published in 1985. In 1988, Ray Toby was hired full-time as lead programmer for Budokan. The DOS version of Budokan was one of the first EA games to use VGA graphics. VGA graphics were new at the time and supported 256 colors. The Sega version can only display 61 colors at once, but the graphics transferred over well. Budokan's sprites were animated by Michael Kosaka and Connie Brott, who previously worked together on Skate or Die. Budokan required more sprites than any EA project at the time, requiring the use of new compression algorithms in order to fit the game on a single floppy disk. I also like the additional detail of the character shadows that actually warp across the floor. Nice touch. Budokan's background graphics were drawn by Mike Nowak and Mike Lebuguin. There sure were a lot of mics on this project. They used Dan Silva's Deluxe Paint, which was initially released by EA in 1985. Dan Silva's Deluxe Paint was widely used by companies in the 90s for game development. Budokan's detailed backgrounds faithfully recreate Japanese scenery, with shots of cherry blossoms, animated cranes, tentacles, and an appearance from Godzilla. Character portraits were painted by EA alumni Cynthia Hamilton, who based many designs on people in the development team. Budokan's music was handled by composer Rob Hubbard. Rob Hubbard was a science fiction writer and founder of the Church of Scientology.
Whoa, that's the wrong Hubbard you got there. You're thinking of Ron Hubbard. Rob Hubbard is a completely different guy.
So Rob Hubbard didn't write Battlefield Earth?
This is why I don't let you talk about sound design. Renowned English composer Rob Hubbard was contracted by EA near the end of Budokan's development. By this point, he already had over 70 video game credits, mostly for Commodore 64 games. If you love the Commodore 64, then you've probably heard some of his tunes before. Budokan's soundtrack was inspired by traditional Japanese music, with some Chinese instruments thrown in for good measure. The DOS version of Budokan supports the Roland MT32 sound card, resulting in impressive music for the time. Unfortunately, there's only 6 songs, and no music plays during the fights. Budokan's theme song and the courtyard theme are the 2 standout tracks. The rest of the soundtrack is simple and atmospheric, but it all fits well. The Sega Genesis port of Budokan relies on the Yamaha YM2612 music synthesizer chip. The chip is also noticeable for its use in the FM Towns home computer and various arcade machines. It has 6 sound channels and outputs digital sound samples in 1 channel. In fact, the digital sound samples on the Sega version of Budokan is even better than the DOS version. The music may not sound as impressive as the DOS version, but for a Sega port, it's not bad. The initial releases of Budokan didn't include a storyline, but EA ended up creating one for the Sega version. It's awesomely cheesy.
I was one bad dude. You get that way growing up in the poor side of town. Back alleys, dark streets. It was just another weekend brawl when he found me. The sirens were closing in when I felt his hand jerk me into the doorway. You fight like a headless chicken. Buzz off, old man. But there is potential there. Are you ready to walk the path of the warrior? Warrior this. I do not offer this out of pity. I owe a great debt to your father. It is for him that I give you this opportunity to join my dojo. Dojo? What dojo?
Okay, so let me get this straight. You're putting your trust on a guy you met in an alleyway whose name means Professor Fish Eggs?
Okay, I didn't put all my trust into him.
Trusted him enough to set your hand on fire?
Hey, I didn't do it for him, Max. I did it for us.
The goal of Budokan is to enter the martial arts tournament and defeat all 12 opponents. One can only win by mastering the 4 martial arts styles found in the game: Karate, Kendo, Bo, and Nunchakus. Upon launching the game, the player will find themselves in the courtyard, which acts as a menu screen. From here, the player can enter dojos to practice the 4 martial arts styles. One can practice alone, with another player, or against a computer-controlled opponent. Visiting Tobiko Sensei will provide the player with philosophical nuggets of wisdom.
For the uncontrolled there is no wisdom. No, for the uncontrolled is the power of concentration. Without concentration there is no peace. And for the unpeaceful, how can there be happiness?
What the hell does that mean?
Maybe you should ask him something else.
Shut up and train.
Before each battle, the player is shown information about their opponent's background and fighting style. The player is then able to choose which fighting style to use in the bout. Each style can only be used 4 times during the tournament, so beating the game requires a bit of strategy as well as brawn. While it's fun to brutalize the karate guys with wooden swords and nunchucks, it's really not the best way to beat the game. You might need those weapons later. The top of the screen displays a stamina bar and a chi bar. Managing these is essential to success. The stamina bar represents the player's health. As it decreases, actions become more sluggish, and more complicated moves become unreliable. When the bar is completely depleted, the player loses. One can raise stamina by resting, but harder opponents raise their stamina much faster than the player, making it a pointless strategy later in the game. Chi represents how much power is behind the player's moves. Attacks deliver more damage if the Chi bar is high. Jumping around and performing moves decreases Chi, while blocking incoming attacks and resting increases it. Chi raises much faster than stamina. The DOS version of Budokan is controlled with a keyboard by default, but also supports joysticks and game controllers. The game is played using 8 directional movement and 1 action button. First-time players are often confused. Attempting to walk by pressing right or left results in the character striking a pose. Walking is actually achieved by pressing diagonally towards the ground. Actually, it's more of a shuffle. Basic moves are performed by pressing the action button along with a corresponding direction. For example, a punch to the midsection is done by pressing the action button and forward at the same time. A punch to the face is done by pressing the action button and up and forward at the same time. Blocks are performed much the same way, by pressing away instead of forward. Holding left or right will pose the character into a different position. Once they're in position, you can press the action button to perform a different move, like a front kick. Usually from these poses, you can press the action button and a different direction to perform a technical move. For example, while in the back pose for the nunchuck style, you can press down and the action button at the same time to do this. Pressing up or diagonally up will cause the player to jump. Jumping while pressing the action button performs a basic jump attack. We recommend looking up the game's manual online if you don't have one. The moves are explained in better detail. If the player manages to beat 11 fighters, they go on to perhaps the toughest opponent one ever faces in life. The fight against oneself. It's like philosophical and stuff. We recommend saving Kendo for the last battle. Keep whacking them in the head and prepare for the ending. The DOS version has a single screen ending. You get a rather nice looking sunset over the ocean with the player's silhouette practicing moves. The Sega version provides extra story material. During the tournament, Tobiko Sensei becomes ill and dies. Teto-san encourages you to fight on.
Who the hell is Teto-san?
I don't know, but he's part of the story now. Upon winning the tournament, the player is given the deed to the dojo, and the words of Tobiko Sensei echo in your mind.
To win 100 victories and 100 battles is not the highest skill. To subdue the enemy without fighting is the highest skill.
Whoa! You can't do that! You can't just add an anti-violence message at the end of the game when you clearly solved all your problems with violence.
Sure you can. Budokan just did.
But the message of peace gets completely lost.
What do you expect? The game was made by EA.
Yeah, I guess
That's what they do.
Budokan received mixed reviews on its initial release. It came during a time when the fighting genre was still in its infancy. It would be another 2 years before Capcom released the arcade blockbuster Street Fighter II, which forever changed the way game designers approached fighting games. By the time Budokan was ported to the Sega Genesis in 1991, everyone had already seen how groundbreaking Street Fighter II was. This led to very poor reviews. Budokan just can't compete with Hadoukens and Sonic Booms. Our biggest problem with the game is with the single-player mode. The game relies on giving later opponents fast regenerative health to increase the game's difficulty. This requires you to exploit the game in order to win. Too often the best strategy is to spam jump attacks over and over again. Trying to have a competitive fight becomes impossible, as battling someone whose health regenerates 4 times faster than you forces you to use tactics that aren't fun. Which is too bad, because the core gameplay actually works really well. Managing ki and stamina is interesting, and performing moves actually feels good. If the AI didn't resort to such health buffs to stay competitive, the game would be much more entertaining.
Michael Kosaka went on to work on more than 20 games, mostly for EA. Notable games include the first Madden game, the Strike series, and Wing Commander 3.
Animator Connie Brott worked on several more games, including The Immortal, Road Rash, Balls 3D, and Gex. It's worth noting that the gruesome death animations that she created for The Immortal are rumored to have inspired the fatalities found in the Mortal Kombat series.
Background artist Mike Nowak left EA after Budokan's release to join Accolade, where he worked on the Les Manly series and Pools of Darkness. He left the video game industry in 1991.
Background artist Michael Anthony Lubbergen left EA in 1998. After working on Namco's Dead to Rights series, he joined Sega to work on Golden Axe Beast Rider, released in 1998.
Cynthia Hamilton left EA in 1996 after spending a decade in the video game industry. She still paints traditional pastel and oil paintings.
Ray E. Toby released his last game in 1996, Blazing Dragons, for the Sony PlayStation. He currently writes software to manage political campaigns for progressive candidates. He's also friends with an owl. Rob Hubbard left EA in 2002 and began working on TV and film in 2009. He most recently provided music for the Neil James's film, The Real Thing.
Budokan is a pretty ambitious fighting game with some interesting ideas. Its flaws are indicative of the pre-Street Fighter II era, when technology and experience held back development of proper fast-paced fighting games. Because of this, it's a hard game to recommend to modern gamers. But if you're interested in fighting games that came out before Street Fighter II, you could do much worse than Budokan, the Martial Spirit.
So, did you win the tournament?
No, they wouldn't even let me compete.
Really? Did it have anything to do with you shattering your hand and setting it on fire?
No, something about a passport or international laws or something, I don't know.
Of course you don't. So, you started this review. How do you want to end it?
Perhaps we should reflect on the masterful teachings from Tobiko Sensei.
The most difficult battle you will ever face is the battle within yourself. Shut up and train.